Welcome to CAL Chat. This is where we talk about our favorite Al-Anon and Alateen literature. You've reached part 3 of 4 of episode 3, and this is where Cindy and I talk a little bit more about perfection and a little bit more about the service manual. There's something else I heard as I grew up, that practice makes perfect. And now I like to say, well, practice makes progress. Because it's not that perfection that I'm shooting for, because I'll never attain.
Right.
It always keeps moving.
Right.
I can aim for progress. That's a little more attainable.
Well, and that's one of our slogans: progress, not perfection. So I was just talking about this with an Al-Anon friend, and we were realizing that for a long time, both of us had still focused on the perfection part of that slogan. that, progress, not perfection. If I just keep going, though, I'll get perfect. That was kind of the unstated part of the slogan, but we realized that, no, what they've been saying all this time is progress, not perfection. Progress is the point, and that when we're progressing and when we're making progress, that is enough. And it was like a major insight. I mean, maybe everybody else already knew that about that slogan, but I had a major insight about it.
The thing about this concepts amendment section being just put in there, there was even, I think, somewhere in there, the introduction, I believe, of that section that says, we're putting this in here just in case, if you feel you've ever lost your way or need to go back to kind of where it started.
Right.
You can find your way back and then just get back on the path kind of thing. And I think it's the same way, too, with trying to avoid perfection and not beating yourself up about it, too.
Right. There's another section that takes me back to my childhood and has shown me such a different way, and that's in the Warranties, particularly in Warranty 4, where it talks about no conference action, but I always look at it as kind of, as an Al-Anon member, my own action should never be personally punitive or an incitement to public controversy. And when I was growing up, the threat of punitive action and punishment was a major part of my life, and it was a major part of the control that was trying to be managed. And in service, and it's particularly at area meetings, just watching the different dynamics between different people, as whether we're talking about the budget or we're talking about a public outreach project, or maybe somebody didn't get their report in so people didn't get a chance to read it ahead of time, that there can be discussion and energy, even tensions, but the idea that any punitive action is going to be taken is simply off the table. And it allows for such a different atmosphere. And in the service manual, I think it's at the end of the concepts, they talk a little bit about the warranties. I'm trying to think about what page that is, 224, I think it is. It talks about non-resistance, that the best attitude for me to have in conflict like that is non-resistance. So I'm putting that in juxtaposition with what I grew up learning. And when something is going wrong or something hasn't been done in my family, that pretty much guaranteed punitive action. Whereas Al-Anon is telling me, don't resist the reality. It's really okay. And, I mean, that has been a huge shift in just lowering that anxiety that it talked about at the beginning, in those earlier pages, those obsessions and anxieties that I might have about the future. When I just accept the reality, and I don't have to worry about the punishment, and I don't have to inflict it on anybody. I can just be with what is right now, and we can move forward from here. I don't think I could have ever even imagined that kind of reaction to something if I hadn't been in Al-Anon. And if I hadn't read it in the service manual about this is how they actually do business. This is how they do business. And then it turns into, this is how I can do the business of my life.
Yeah, it just seems to easily translate very well over to regular everyday stuff.
Right.
And I was always thrown by that part in Warranty 5 about Al-Anon never performing an act of government. I wasn't really sure what that meant. Levy taxes, or, what does that mean?
Right.
But then it talked about going back to the no punitive action, that there is no jail time, there's no Al-Anon jail.
Right.
If it breaks a rule.
You don't get expelled.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, no one's ever forced out of the fellowship. No one's ever exiled.
Right.
Oh.
And I love what it goes on in that Warranty 5, and it talks about always trying to act with mutual respect and love. And I remember a practice, the 11th step, like if I'm trying to understand what God's will is in my life and the power to carry that out, God, I remember saying something along the lines of, you need to be pretty simple with me. If you're going to, please don't make it complicated. I can complicate things enough. And I kept getting this sense about love. And I had a very sentimental idea about love when I came into Al-Anon, very hearts and flowers and pink. But I understand from the reading, and I understand from the interactions and the love that I've gotten from Al-Anon members, that mutual respect and love is a deep spiritual choice in how I'm going to act in any given way. And it doesn't mean that I'm always serious and I never laugh, but it has this recognition of worth of the other person and worth of myself. And, we read the warranties for so many years. I heard them, blah, 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 blah. But being able to read them deeply and over again and apply them really has made such a difference and shown me a different definition of love, really.
I think that's beautiful. I know we've covered quite a bit in this manual. Was there any other part that you wanted to focus on? Or?
Well, I kind of have to just mention briefly the little piece about the concepts the difference between legal and traditional. Concept 6, acknowledging the responsibility of the trustees, and 7 being the legal rights and the conference being traditional. Mostly it's concept 7, I think. Anyway, page 194, it seems a very dry concept. And the only reason I like to mention it is because as my children have grown up while I've been in Al-Anon, I had a very legal relationship in their life at one point while I was in Al-Anon. I had legal responsibilities for them. And now they are grown, they're in their 20s, and they're adults on their own. And I find my relationship with them to be more traditional. And I have gone back over and over to this concept and to the World Service Conference summary, and because the more I understand the relationship between the conference and the trustees, the more comfortable I am with my children and having a traditional relationship with them and not being so worried about being really involved in the minutia of their life. And in doing that, I know that I'm giving them the gift of freedom to be who they are. And that's the trust, when you brought that up about the original language, about the old timers giving I know this is going to be okay going forward. And that's the same feeling I can get with my children all moving away this year and setting up their homes in other cities and doing things. I know it's going to be okay. And Al-Anon gave me that confidence.
Yeah, and I turned to that page 194 when you were mentioning it, and it's definitely concept 7 that you're referencing. Just for anybody listening, going, "Oh, that's not concept 6." It was concept 7, just like you said. So.
Well, they work together because also on page 194, up in the concept 6 part, it does talk about having a careful review of the legal and traditional rights. It's important that we do that we take the time to review what is my legal responsibility, what is my traditional responsibility at any given time in our lives. We might have a legal or a traditional perspective. But yes, you're right, it is a concept 7.
And I think going back to this concept 7 about your children, I'm now in a position where my mother is in her 80s, and while, we have a traditional relationship, it won't always be like that because she eventually will have to turn over a power of attorney, and then, when she's infirmed and can't make legal decisions on her own, and then it'll become a legal relationship as well.
And that you'll have guidance. You'll have guidance in the spiritual processes and spiritual principles underlying it so that you can make the best decision for your family. And I think at the end of the day, that is the real help and hope that Al-Anon gives, and that's what the service manual continues to remind me, is that I'm not a rule book, the service manual. I hear the service manual talking to me, I'm not a rule book, but I can help you find clarity to make the decision that is best for you. And I would say that that is definitely true of my reading of the service manual. I never feel like I am directed to do one particular thing, but I always feel like I am more clear after I've read it, and I'm able to make a good decision. I'm able to have confidence in myself to make the best decision that I can make.
I'm getting goosebumps right now. So for anyone listening, if you were like me back when I started my original home group, the service manual was buried in the very bottom of the bucket of our Al-Anon literature. So if that's the case with your home group, we hope you'll unbury it, dust the dust off, and give it a look, even just reading just a little bit a day at a time. One day.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
We hope you'll find some treasures in it, just like we did.
Right.
Well, we'll take a break now, and this is where we will hear a few words from one of our sponsors.
Hi, this is Susan, Cindy's sponsor, and my words to pass along are just to share one of my favorite slogans, which is, how important is it? And the main point of this slogan, to me, at least in my life, is to don't obsess and go do and focus on what's important.
All right, thanks, Susan, for those wise words from the sponsor. And this brings us to the end of part 3 of 4 of episode 3. So there's one more part to go. Part 4 is already uploaded, and hope you enjoy listening to that one too.